And good morning and hello. This is Boles.tv, BOLES.tv. The hair is looking amazingly good today. It's been about 8 weeks of disaster, but now it's growing out a little bit. It looks thinner than it really is. Bright lights, big city. This is what you get going on over here a little bit. But don't look at it. So it's 9 o'clock Eastern. I'm David Boles, and if it's night where you are, if it's the evening, I hope you're having a wonderful day. And I hope your day will get better, and if today was a bad day, tomorrow will be better, because tomorrow is a new day and we start all over. Lots of interesting things to talk about today. Some left over from yesterday. Will be an interesting conversation about who we are, where we're going, and what kind of values we have as a nation and as a community of people. And we seem to get into the most trouble in America is when our values clash. We have one group over here who believes this, we have one group over here who believes this, and they cannot come together. There's no way, there's no overlapping, there's no possibility of a Venn diagram. There's no shaded space that's safe. But we try to be a safe space here. You can comment and chat and say a little something. Disagree? Agree? Say nothing. So we'll start with a little bit of news and what we're thinking about today. And here is the most fun. 6 years ago today, we were verified. Our page was verified on Facebook. And verification's important, I think, especially on Twitter and Facebook, because it says who you are is who you are. There's a lot of anonymity on the internet, and a lot of wondering who's there and who isn't there. Dora's here. Hello, Dora. It's a beautiful day on the East Coast. 50 degrees, sunshine. What are we doing inside? We should be going for a walk, a 2-hour walk, with my iPhone, and we'll live stream. I might do that later, but probably not live streaming. And a verified page means the person that you're interacting with is actually that person or that entity. And I think that's really important online. Because, I'm still getting a little hot boxed from yesterday. 9 o'clock, seeps in through the walls. And too often we are interacting with and having conversations with people we don't know who they are. They have these weird usernames that have nothing to do with their real names or their identities, and when people go anonymous, they really tend to not behave very friendly. They don't behave well. And some people are in a situation where they need to hide their name and they need to be anonymous, and that's fine. Those are not usually the people who are trolling you and throwing things at you virtually. So I like when you hover over this check mark, this blue check mark on Facebook, on our page, BOLES, Facebook, confirms that this person that you're interacting with is that person. Now, to some people that doesn't mean anything because there are like at least 10 David Boleses all over the world. One is a very successful lawyer in the UK. Another is a doctor in the South. One is an investment banker in New York City. And we're all mistaken for each other. And I get all of their email, and they get all of my email, and everything is a big mess. And you'd think that David Boles is sort of a unique name. And when you're living in Nebraska in the Midwest, it is a unique name. You're the only one. But then the world becomes bigger, and you get out, and the internet connects you, and you find out, oh, you're not as special as you thought you were. Everybody has your name. So you have to be careful with branding and associations, and some people use my email address as their email address, rightly or wrongly, I'm not sure. And years ago, I used to take the time to say, hey, the email address that you're using for yourself, with your bank and with your insurance company and the online stuff you're buying, all of that is going to me, all the receipts, all your credit card information. And sometimes I would try to call them on the phone and they wouldn't answer, or I would find other ways to contact them and let them know, hey, you're using the wrong email address. And several of them won't have an attitude. Who are you? You don't tell me what my email address is. And with those people, I say, okay, just keep sending me all your banking information. What can I do about it? And sometimes they try to get your banking information. And that's bad because that's identity theft. They accuse me of stealing their identity. And I say, wait a minute, you're the one who put in my email address in your bank account. You're stealing my identity. You're stealing my email address. I'm not stealing your email address. But you can't reason with them. They don't want to hear it. So you try once or twice to be friendly and kind and say, hey, you're writing down the wrong email address. And either they get it or they don't. And in my experience, 99% they don't get it. What else is in the news? Oh, this hurt my feelings just a little bit. And is it because I'm a sensitive person or because I'm an overreactor? Probably a little bit of both. So here's the news that Twitter is now rolling out automatic captions for their videos. The answer to hotboxing is Jan Marie. Thank you for the follow, Seth Rogen. Is it really Seth Rogen? We'll never know. We were just talking about verified people. And if people are who they say they are. And I'm looking at this account right now. And I don't know. Could be, couldn't be. I won't tell you any details about the account because I don't want to dox anybody, but hey, maybe it is Seth Rogen. We'll never know. Unless Seth Rogen joins the chat and tells us. Love the name. I love the name too. And if you click on that Seth Rogen name, you'll see an image and a photograph, which makes me think it's probably not Seth Rogen. Not that Seth Rogen. Maybe there are 10 Seth Rogens, and one of them is an attorney in the UK, and one of them is a physician in the South, and one of them is an investment banker in New York City. Maybe we're all just each other's doppelgangers. So this news from Twitter is really terrific that they're now going to auto-caption videos. They'll be available globally on iOS, Android, and the web in most languages, according to the Twitter. However, there's one significant catch. Now, I don't think this is a catch at all. They're saying that from this moment forward, we're going to be captioning the videos. But the stuff you already published, we're not going back and republishing that. And if you understand anything about how the internet works and how video works, you understand why there's just no way they can do that. There were millions and millions of videos that would need to be captioned, and they're not going to caption. So that's okay. Nobody like that's a big thing. It's a nothing thing. Twitter has somewhat a rocky history with accessibility features, though has taken steps to improve. The company was heavily criticized for launching voice tweets in 2020, very true, without captions, which completely leaves out people who can't hear or who have trouble hearing. And it came to light soon that Twitter did not have a dedicated accessibility team at the time. And most big companies do, but I understand why some of them don't, because it's a lot of hassle. Yeah, Seth Rogen's a big actor, big comedy actor. At least the Seth Rogen that we're talking about. We don't know the Seth Rogen in our group, but we can pretend that he is that Seth Rogen. Since that time, in 2020, Twitter has created 2 teams focused on accessibility. And it did eventually add captions to voice tweets, though more than a year after they first launched. That I understand as well, because it's very technically difficult to caption something, especially if you're using artificial intelligence to automatically caption something. A lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of server overhead to do that. And it's hot here, as I said, so the windows are open. You'll hear fire trucks going by in a moment. Very loud, and the window's open that much, and we're as far away from the window as you can get. Life in the big city. Twitter also added live captions to Spaces. It's Clubhouse-like audio room product. So that is just wonderful news. And that wonderful news makes me slightly sad in that here we are on the Twitch, hoping for some sort of captioning like Twitch offers and that Facebook offers and that YouTube offers, and Twitch offers nothing. Unless your video comes directly from the Twitch people, the Twitch gods. Not even partners, I don't believe, just the Twitch gods. Thank you, Dora. The sirens just add that New York flavor. Absolutely true. When I first moved to New York, someone called me and said, every time I call you, I hear sirens. I said, yeah, the fire station's right downstairs, so it goes on all day and all night. It's part of the enterprise of living in New York City. Well, it sounds like a dangerous place to live. Well, if you're hearing fire trucks going by, that sounds like that's someone helping someone, not necessarily something that's dangerous. Oh, the sirens are just wonderful. I wish I were closer so you could hear them better. So I wonder when and if Twitch will make the decision to one day caption either video on demand stuff or the live streams, although live captioning of a live stream is also very intensive and probably not doable right away. But that's why I'm a little bit jealous, envious of Twitter, because they're finally doing the right thing in captioning these videos, whereas where we stream on Twitch with our deaf co-host on Fridays, Jana Marie, and Jana Marie, our deaf host, on Saturday and Sunday, and her deaf friends and her students who would like to see some captions, perhaps, of this part of the show, are left out. Now, this is also very interesting to me. As a vegan of about, 15 years now, I do the vegan thing, of course, for the animals, but also for my health. It started selfishly for my health. Animal fat makes my cholesterol skyrocket and makes my blood pressure really go out of whack, so I have to be very careful about what I eat. That kind of saturated animal fat does not get along with my body very well. And you want people to be healthy, you want people to know what's going on, so I carefully talk about health in terms of diet, and some people want to hear it and some people don't. And since I come from the Midwest, most people back there don't. And when they start giving me a hard time, like ordering a hamburger and having it moo at me, which I guess is a really funny thing to them, I just respond with, okay, well, this falafel burger that I'm eating right now is going to be your diet in 20 years. What do you mean? I said, well, we'll see. We'll see how well your health stands up, and we'll see in 20 years if you're eating that big, gigantic cow burger, or if you're eating plant-based in 20 years. We'll see what the hospital and what the doctor says. Well, I'll never eat plants. Okay. So this big thing is the first page in a 4-page spread of a local grocery store in the Midwest. And it just struck me today because I really don't see this kind of advertising where I live on the East Coast. People try to be healthy, or at least they try to pretend to be healthy in public. But this kind of advertising is just right in your face. Just like the Arby's ads. We have the meats that you see on TV all the time. Well, here's Hy-Vee. They don't have the meats. They have the best meat. And oh boy. What is it, 15 things? 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 things that they want you to... 11 things they want you to eat and buy at a low price to make your cholesterol go up. I found a little surprising, but this was the most interesting one to me. This bundle, the meat bundle, $55. Select varieties, 20 pounds of meat. What's exactly in the meat bundle? Well, we're not going to tell you that, but it's meat bundle number 10. Behind mystery door number 1. I don't even know what all of this is. Chicken. That looks like chocolate. I don't know what it is. But this is where people come from. This is their life. They eat steak 3 times a day. And where I was raised, it was steak and potatoes. And if you weren't eating that, you were not really living. And the economy in the Midwest is agricultural. A lot of animals, a lot of hogs, a lot of cows being slaughtered every day. So we can have this kind of advertising. Just another interesting tidbit that was sent to me from the PR people. That during the pandemic, religious affiliation fell, which I thought was very interesting. Do they feel abandoned by God in this pandemic? Or is something else going on? Well, they say that younger people are not really interested in organized religion very much. It's the older generation who is hanging on. Religious affiliation in the U.S. has continued to fall during the pandemic, says Pew Research. The percentage of Americans who identify as Christian now stands at 63, down 2% from 65 in 2019, and from 78% in 2007. Meanwhile, 29% of Americans now identify as having no religion whatsoever, up from 26% in 2019 and 16% in 2007 when Pew began tracking religious identity. So you wonder if the Christians, the 2% lost on the Christian side, went over to the I don't believe in anything side. Many places of worship closed during the pandemic, some voluntarily, others as a result of state and local social distancing rules. And in-person church attendance is roughly 30 to 50% lower than it was before the pandemic. In the U.S., millions of Americans moved to worshiping online, and questions linger about how many will come back in person. Well, isn't that interesting? Something's beeping at me. Okay. Well, isn't that interesting? That a pandemic can make religiosity go down. And I don't think it was really the pandemic that made religiosity go down. I think it's just sort of generally happening that way across the board. Even the evangelicals, that I don't know. They didn't talk about the evangelicals. And they're very interesting people. Though evangelicals, are they Christian? I had one person tell me when I was younger that Catholics are not Christians. And I thought, what? Why? And I know some Episcopalians say the only difference between their religion and the Catholic religion is that the Episcopalians don't have a pope. Everything else is the same. I don't know anything about it. I just sit and listen and try to figure it out. Now, this is probably the most interesting chart I've seen in a long time, and it really hit me for how fascinating it is. We know the South tends to be very religious, more so than the East Coast or the West Coast, generally speaking. And this pops up in my inbox, ranking. They do in 5, from 1 to 10, from 11 to 20. So there are 5 different colors of green. And the darker colors of green indicate states where the people, the workers, the proletariat, are demanding, hello, thanks for the follow. So sappy. And what's fascinating about this is these are people who want to work from home. They don't want to go back into the office. And what I find so interesting about this map is that to my untrained scientific eye that tries to be as educated as possible, I look at this map and I see people who do not want to go back to work in the office. They want to work from home, but they don't want to be stuck inside with a lot of other people. The top states, the darkest green states, who refuse to go back to the office to interact with other people, are the hard South and Arizona. Now, what's interesting about those states, the southern states and Arizona, the number one state where the people say, I'm not going back to the office, I'm working from home, is Mississippi. Second is Georgia. Third is South Carolina. Do you see a pattern here? Well, to my eye, it's very interesting that the people who do not want to go to work are the places that are not interested in getting a COVID-19 vaccine, generally speaking, and the places where COVID is more uncontrolled than it is on, say, the East Coast or the West Coast. New York ranks 22, California ranks 40 in not wanting to go back to the office. New Jersey is 28. So it makes you wonder, why? Why don't they want to go back to the office and interact inside in their cubicles for 8 hours a day? Are they afraid of getting infected from COVID? But they don't want to take the vaccine. I don't know the answer, but I do wonder what it means. Texas is number 13 for not wanting to go back to the office. It's very curious. Some might say it's even a little bit funny. Now, speaking of not funny, I saw this yesterday on Instagram. These are from the Democrats. America's mass shooting epidemic. There have been over 70 mass shootings in the past 10 years. And Americans deserve action on guns, and California is stepping forward in the same way that Texas stepped forward on abortion. Democrats are working to end gun violence. And all those orange dots you see being popped up are where these shootings have taken place over the past 10 years. And as a country, we're not doing anything about it. We're just letting it stay. And it makes you wonder, how soon is all this going to blow up in our face, and not theoretically? And what's most interesting is these incidents of gun violence are not really limited in scope. There's East Coast, West Coast, South, Midwest, which sort of tells you that it's really not that safe anywhere. And the places where it's safe are where a lot of Americans do not live. And speaking of justice, oh boy, this is a tough one. Former New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo has to give back $5.1 million that he was paid in advance for his book on how he saved New York from COVID-19. And he has to give it back in 30 days. And he's saying, I don't have to give it back. And the JCOPE, the J-Cope, is saying, oh, no, 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 no. You didn't tell us the truth, and you have to give us the money, because what we agreed for you to do, you didn't do. And what I think is so interesting is this, that at the bottom of this article, the order, which is sure to set up a protracted legal fight, could be complicated by the fact that Mr. Cuomo already donated $500,000 of the book's proceeds to charity. Well, that can be easily fixed. The charity can give back the money, or a J-Cope can say they can keep the money. That's not for Cuomo to decide. But here's the most interesting part, that he thinks helps his case. And of that $5.1 million, Cuomo placed $1 million in a trust fund for his daughters. Well, what can I do? I've already given $1 million to my daughters, and it's in a trust fund, so you can't touch it. So, not that they give it back to me, but it's their money. I set it up for them, so it's not my money anymore. It's my daughter's money. I don't find that argument very convincing. And I don't think J-Cope will either. But who knows? But when you hear about Andrew Cuomo, Chris Cuomo, you think, oh my, how the mighty have fallen. A year ago, they were on top of the world. And perhaps they didn't quite behave right in order to stay there. And now the truth comes calling and pulls them down into the depths with the rest of us. And now, my friend, it's time for a blood pressure break, and that means I'm going to see you in just a moment. Thank you for being here. And we're back from break. I'm David Boles. This is Boles.tv, BOLES.tv, live every day, 9 a.m. Eastern, here for you. Fridays, Jana Marie joins us around 10:15 Eastern for an ASL sign language lesson. And then on Saturdays and Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern, she has a new show called Ask a Deaf Person, where you can stop by and ask her anything you want about deafness or disability or sign language or whatever else is on your mind. Ask her about Nebraska football. She has an opinion on everything. And if she doesn't know, she'll tell you. And if she doesn't know, she'll look it up. And I'll be there too. I moderate because I want to make sure she doesn't get trolled by people who show up and try to give her a hard time like they give me a hard time. So she doesn't have to worry about that. People coming in and using poopy words and trying to hurt our feelings. Well, Davy, well. As my Uncle Mills used to say, in this sort of situation, we have a situation. And it's a very difficult one because if you're not a Trump supporter, let's say it that way, and if you want to try to support liberal ideas and progressive tactics, you're sort of stuck with Joe Biden as your president. He was not my choice. I love Pete Buttigieg. Pete has it all. Knows how to fight, number one, and very smart, and knows a lot about everything, and he's a military guy, and they really can't touch him except on one issue, which is his sexuality, which, as the days go by, that matters less and less. So Joe Biden ran on this idea, one of his many ideas, that, hey, we have a student loan problem in America, and I'm going to help you. I'm going to wipe off $10,000 that you don't have to pay back. Now, to many of us who are in this boat, and I have a lot of friends and associates who are my age, who are struggling with student loan debt. And when you were going to graduate school at an elite school in the 90s, the only way to get there, if you didn't have any family money, was to take out loans. You could not work enough hours in the day to pay for your expenses. Especially if you were married or you had kids, the only way to do it was to bet on yourself and risk your future by taking out these massive loans. And Elizabeth Warren, among other people, has said, well, $10,000, it should be $50,000. If you wipe out $50,000 in loans, 84% of the people who currently have loans will be out of debt, and they can contribute to the economy in many more positive ways, which has been going on for about 2 years since the pandemic started, and Donald Trump paused all of our student loan debt. And Joe Biden is starting it up again at the end of January. And people like Elizabeth Warren say, why? Just wipe out the whole thing. Well, I can't do that, Joe Biden says. I have to get feedback. So he got feedback on if he was allowed to wipe out all student debt, and he will not reveal the results of what he was told. And my feeling is he was told it's fine, you can do it because you're the president. And the reason he's not telling us is because he doesn't want to do it. Why? Joe Biden's of the people, for the people. Well, maybe, but not really. If you know the history of Joe Biden as a senator, you know that he gave Anita Hill a very hard time when Justice Thomas was appointed to the Supreme Court. And Joe Biden was the senator from Delaware. And that's where all the banks have their headquarters, because Delaware is a very friendly state for big money and banks. And Joe Biden felt it was his responsibility, just as Joe Manchin feels it's his responsibility to protect the coal industry. Joe Biden was beholden to the big banks. And he has always been beholden to big money. Joe Biden. Democrat, Republican, if they're in Congress, the vast majority of them are beholden to big money. But they pretend they're not. They pretend they're of the people. They pretend they're there to help the people. And so Joe Biden had all this money and support from the big banks. And he said, to get elected, I'm going to wipe off $10,000 worth of your student loans. And people who are educated, smart, young, tough, old, were delighted and thrilled. Oh my gosh, isn't that great? I'm a one-issue voter for Joe Biden. I want to get rid of these student loans that are killing us. And for the past 2 years, no one's made any payments. And the economy seems to be doing really great. Just fine. And now I hear on the news today, once these student loans start being paid back, we're going to be having $7 billion more a month in money. And I ask, if that's true, where has that money been for the past 2 years? We seem to be getting by fine just without it. But who am I? What do I know? And Joe Biden, as the senator from Delaware, single-handedly rewrote the bankruptcy rules 10, 15 years ago. That punishes poor people, people who make mistakes with money, more than the previous bankruptcy laws did. And he did that on behalf of the banks, who he represented in Delaware. And he also made it very clear back then, in rewriting those bankruptcy rules, you cannot ever get rid of your student loans in a bankruptcy. And people wonder why. It's the one thing you really cannot get rid of, are your student loans. They hang with you forever. They are the gravestone you wear around your neck for most of your life. And I guess there are some people who, once you reach the age of 72 and you have these student loans, then you can file bankruptcy and say, I'm on Social Security, I'll never be able to pay these off. And maybe, some judge somewhere will say, I agree with you. We'll include your student loans in your bankruptcy. Oh, great. And then a month later, after your bankruptcy is finished, you get a note from the IRS saying, well, your loans were discharged, but we're counting that as income. So you now have to pay taxes, even though you're retired, on $100,000 to make it easy. $100,000 worth of income that we're counting as your student loans that have been forgiven, which translates to about $30,000 you would owe in taxes on that income money you didn't get, but that you had 40 years ago when you were in school to pay your tuition. And so then the only way around that is you have to go probably hire a lawyer or hire an accountant and then go back 5 years and try to recalculate all of your income that you got smashed with, a $100,000 bill from the IRS, which is $30,000 you owe them, and try to even out, as I understand it, I don't even know if this works, this is all theory, and try to even out the payments you have to make over those 5 years. So even if you could discharge your student loans in bankruptcy, it still is going to be counted as income. Unless the government changes it. And the government does not want to change it. And yesterday, we received proof and evidence that Joe Biden will be a one-term president. Kamala Harris will not be elected in his stead in 2024. And the Democrats are giving up on 2022. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Here you go, right here. It's been on screen while this doing this whole rant. We have now confirmation. Some say that Joe Biden is a liar and did not mean what he said. And some people online are saying, well, why should we forgive student loans? The students made the decision. And I say that's absolutely true. And sometimes people make bad decisions, and they shouldn't be punished with it for the rest of their lives. They were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to get an education. They were trying to have a better life. They needed help escaping from where they were trapped. And as you know, animals will gnaw off their legs to get out of a trap. And as you may not know, there are students who will gnaw off their futures in order to escape where they are stuck, so they can get the heck out and have a new and better life. And sometimes on that path, you have to take out a loan. And it's disturbing and disruptive. So the White House said yesterday, it's up to Congress to help execute President Joe Biden's promise to cancel $10,000 in student loans per borrower. Oh, yeah. So Biden has now shifted all this idea and all this blame for his student loan promise to Congress. A Congress that he knows can't do anything. The do-nothing Congress, as they say, and as they will continue to say. So isn't that the perfect feint? Well, if I could do it, it'd be done. But I can't do it. I'm just the president, so I'm sending it over. Now, I've had this theory that if Donald Trump had done two things, one of two things, he would be president instead of Joe Biden. And we cannot escape the fact that under Donald Trump, as they're saying in the student loan groups online, under Donald Trump, we didn't have to pay our loans for 2 years. And under Joe Biden, we have to pay. How does that work? Ridiculous. You can extend it. Just keep extending it past the 2022 election so you can get the Democrats elected again. But it's not going to happen now. If Donald Trump had done one of two things, and if he had done both of them, he would be probably king of the United States for life. One, if before the election, a month or two, he had been able to deliver more stimulus money. Instead of the $1,200 per person thing, but he had a Republican Congress, a Republican Senate, whatever he wanted to do would have been approved. And if he had said, hey, I'm not giving you $1,200. By the 1st of October, I'm giving you $5,000 per person. Me, Donald Trump. You don't have to thank me. We're in a pandemic. I care about you. I want you to do well. $1,200 is not enough. I'm giving you $5,000. And we have an election coming up in a month. But don't let that fog your mind. If he had done that and delivered $5,000 per person, he would be president. It's that easy. Oh, he's buying votes. Of course. The $1,200 was buying votes. So go all the way and do it right. That's one of two. The second thing is, of course, if Donald Trump had said, and it would have been very keen and very, very smart, if Donald Trump had made an announcement in mid-October as he was signing this presidential decree, whatever, all student loan debt has been canceled by me, Donald J. Trump. Wiped off the board. Now, legal or not, who's going to challenge it? Not anyone in the Republicans. The Democrats can't say anything because that's precisely what they want for their people, because it's a big help to their voters. And once he cancels it and people stop paying, there's no way they can go back in time and say, oh, by the way, what we said a year or two ago, where the president was canceling all your debt, well, we're reinstating it. Never, ever would happen. So, Donald Trump says, no more student loan debt. Now, what does that do for him? If he didn't do the $5,000 deal guarantees re-election. The student loan by itself, I believe, would have also guaranteed his re-election, because people who tend to have these big loans tend to go to liberal schools and universities, and people who try to be educated and try to live a moral life want to do the right thing. And by being relieved of that sort of massive, uncontrollable debt, people, students, would feel a responsibility and an obligation, I believe, to say thank you. and to vote for Donald Trump. Because immediately think, oh, well, maybe I've underestimated him. Maybe he's not such a bad guy after all these things he's done to other people. But for me, I don't have to pay my student loans anymore. And I think he could easily steal 2% away from Joe Biden, from people who feel they should be with the Democrats and Joe Biden. But if you know the history of Democrats, they really don't get along and they can't get anything done. I wrote an article in bolesblogs.com called Merrick Garland Will Not Save Us. A ridiculous choice for Attorney General. He's a Republican who Obama picked because he thought the Republicans would approve him. And I guess as some kind of big joke on all of us, Joe Biden picked him to be our Attorney General. Ridiculous. So you'd have these big swath of very smart, intelligent, powerful people, powerful in their own way, who would feel obliged to vote for Trump for getting rid of this nasty thing that encompasses their lives, these student loan debt, which they cannot escape from, ever. Not even in death, it will follow them. Even in retirement. You can't pay your loans, you default on your loans, I think they take 15% off of any Social Security you get to pay your loans. Donald Trump would have been a hero. He would have been a liberal Democrat hero for wiping out those student loans. Joe Biden could do the same thing, but he won't. He can't. Why? Because he has been owned most of his professional life by big banks. And big banks don't want to forgive anything. If you take their money, they're going to get it back from you somehow. What is the message to those people who feel that he, Biden, is yet to follow through on that promise of student loan debt relief? A reporter asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Well, if Congress sends him a bill, he's happy to sign it. They haven't sent him a bill on that yet. Psaki responded, oh boy, you read that, it just makes your blood boil. Talk about deferment. Talk about a toxic relationship. Oof. Biden campaigned on approving $10,000 in student debt cancellation per borrower, and people voted for him because of that reason. But he has still not done one thing 11 months into his presidency. And student loans are starting up again. This is why this is all hot in the news. You're getting emails from your student loan people saying, hey, nice to see you back. You're going to start paying again, you big dummy. In a speech on November 16th, he, Biden, said student loans are holding borrowers up, and forgiving $10,000 should be done immediately. What a big phony. In March of 2020, Joe Biden, no bill should pass without immediate generous relief for workers who are losing their jobs and hours. Small businesses losing revenue, and communities facing emergency needs. Joe Biden again, replying to himself. Additionally, we should forgive a minimum of $10,000 per person of federal student loans, as proposed by Senator Warren and her colleagues. Young people and other student debt holders bore the brunt of the last crisis. It shouldn't happen again. Well, Davy, well. It's happening, and Big Joe Biden's letting it happen. And he's going to pay for it. People are angry, and they're not going to vote Democrat into the 2022 election. Watch. Joe Biden's campaign website said he'd work with Democrats to authorize up to $10,000 in student debt relief per borrower as part of a COVID-19 relief. However, the $1.9 trillion stimulus, the $1.9 trillion stimulus package he, Biden, signed in March didn't include any student debt relief. And in early February, shortly after Biden was sworn in and pressure to fulfill the student loan cancellation began, Jen Psaki said the president's calling on Congress to draft the proposal. This is not going away. People are getting very angry with this Joe Biden. But lawmakers have insisted that Joe Biden can get it done himself by simply signing an executive order. And that is true. That has been talked about for years. But no president wants to do it. Not even Donald J. Trump. To get reelected, to be king for life. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer have led the push to cancel $50,000 in student debt per borrower, which they believe Biden can do on his own via the Higher Education Act. So it seems like Joe Biden's the only one in the room who says, I can't possibly do it. And you wonder why, and then you realize who he is, where he came from, and how he got his money. He is beholden to the big banks. Canceling $50,000 in student debt would completely wipe out student loans for 84% of borrowers, including more than 3 million borrowers who have been repaying their loans for more than 20 years. You pay for 20 years, you can't get out. They won't let you get out. Or they'll say, yeah, you can get out, but you got to repay. We're reporting it as income to the IRS. The rest of your loans that you owe. Are loans income? No. Unless they're forgiven, then we, the IRS, count it as income. Senator Warren said this is the single most effective executive action President Biden could take to jumpstart our economy and begin to narrow the racial wealth gap. And isn't that the truth? And the sirens are coming. With this big mess that was announced yesterday by Jen Psaki about Biden's inaction on student loans, and instead of him being a man and standing up and taking care of it, she's pushing it over on the Democrats in Congress. Well, if they send us a bill, we'll think about it. And so the rest of us suffer, and the rest of us who are determined and angry and perhaps smart and probably vengeful will absolutely remember this in the 2022 election. And my fear is it's going to be a really great year for the Republicans. And with that, my friend, it's that time of day again. High blood pressure break time. I'll see you in one moment. And we're back for break. I'm David Boles on Boles.tv, BOLES.tv. Well, it's only been an hour. I feel like I've been ranting all morning. Screaming at the clouds, yelling into the abyss. And I'm not done yet! There are more things to discuss. One of which is something we talked about yesterday. Yesterday we learned about a study that the more you think about it, the more offensive it is. And that was this, that when you work in teams, especially at work, let's say, people who are supportive of each other are viewed by others in the team as being more valuable than people who are, I don't want to say complainers, but who are contrary, who say, yeah, but, and are critical. And there's a danger in that I spoke about yesterday and that I've been thinking about and that I'm going to bring up again right now. Getting along just to go along doesn't help anybody at any time. Now, you don't have to be contrary and always disagree with everybody, because who wants that in your life? I mean, you don't want to be in a team with someone or married to someone or friends with someone who is always giving you a hard time about every little thing. And we've all had that kind of experience. But it doesn't mean we have to put up with it. We don't have to be that way, and people can learn and people can be taught. Look, if I ask for feedback, I'd love to hear what you have to say. But if I don't ask, don't tell me how fat I am. Let's just wait until the proper time. Whatever. But in this research study, this thing we discussed yesterday, that people who were supportive were always given preference. And that's kind of the world we live in today. People don't want bad news. People don't want to hear anything negative, anything critical. If you're trying to improve something that someone's talking about, you're hurting my feelings. My feelings are more important than this project. You need to be supportive. And you know people are going to use that. Well, I read this study and it said that if you're supportive, you're part of the team. And if you're not supportive, you're not part of the team. You're not on our team anymore because you're coming up with ideas that we don't like. Now, I was raised a long time ago in the Midwest that brainstorming was a very effective tool for being in a group where everybody could feel free to just throw out whatever they had, put the ideas up on a chalkboard, for people who know what a chalkboard is, then became a whiteboard. Now it becomes a computer and some kind of projected screen. And we'll sift through all of these ideas. And there's no idea that's too wacky or too dumb or too brilliant or too stupid or too irregular for us to have a conversation about it. And I think that's a really good way to work. I like that. But it's not supportive. If you're just throwing out any idea you have, you're not supporting my idea. So I want to say today that if you're in a learning situation or a leading situation, is to learn from anarchists. Learn from people who don't want to follow what everybody else is doing. Learn people who think different, as Apple said. Find people who like to go their own way, who have their own pathway. And maybe ask them to stop. Hey, you're on this path. Can you just come back to our path and tell us what you see over there? Because maybe we're going to go that way with you. But that sort of thinking isn't very popular today, because if you're going that way, you're not part of the group. You're being antithetical. You're being antisocial. If you want me to report you for being a good person, you have to come back and you have to support my idea. Not going this way. I like people who go that way. I like difficult people. Not saying that I'm one of them. But difficult people have ideas and they're strong and they stand by them. And difficult people are perfectly happy with saying, I don't agree with that. Thank you for sharing. I'm going this way and I'm going to keep going. I'm not coming back. And to those people, you say, okay, I'll see you later. Let us know what happens. There's nothing wrong with that. No, you have to be part of the team. Cannot be critical. You have to be supportive. So I like radical thinkers. I like people who are anti-establishment. I like people who think outside the box, as the old saying goes, and who find ways to convince people that perhaps we should be thinking in a different way. Perhaps this box that we're thinking outside of is not really a box, but more like an octagon. So we're not thinking outside of the box, we're thinking outside the trapezoid. Well, what does that mean? Well, what do you think it means? And then a conversation begins. Sharing thoughts that have not already been thought or shared is very exciting. And in the groups that I've been a part of, when someone raises their hand and begins a sentence with, what if? Now that's an interesting person. That's a person who's thinking creatively and who may or may not be supportive in what comes next. But the what if, right there is a challenge to, hey, wait a minute. Let's talk and think about something that we're not already talking and thinking about. So the next step in that thought from yesterday that we're finishing today and now starting in a new theme is that anarchy does not mean cruelty. Anarchy does not mean subjugation. And now we get into this, which is just disturbing to me on so many levels, and yet there is support for this idea that started in 1968 with the murder of Martin Luther King. This is a video that I'm not going to play for you because I don't have the rights to play it for you, but I can show you this, the title of the video, and who's in the video, older people. So since 1968, Jane Elliott, and if you watch this video, she's not... hello! Thank you for the follow. Jane Elliott is not terribly friendly. Jane Elliott is not really interested in being wrong. So Jane Elliott, 1968, after the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King, went back to her classroom and did something very different and very odd. And unfortunately, for all of us, it's been around ever since. And I'm going to see if I can find it. That's her website. That's not what I'm looking for. That's not what I'm looking for. That's not what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for. This is what she did. And she's from Iowa, which is where my beautiful wife is from. And Jane Elliott, after Martin Luther King was murdered, went back to her classroom full of third graders and did the following thing. And we'll read through this quickly because you probably already know what this is. If you're my age and you've been to school, people have pulled this kind of junk on you. Elliott taught third grade schoolers in Riceville, Iowa, a small town in northern Iowa. 28 students filed in the classroom the morning after Martin Luther King was assassinated, talking about what had happened. How do you think it would feel to be a Negro boy or girl? Elliott asked her students. All of her children in the classroom were white. It would be hard to know, wouldn't it? Unless we actually experienced discrimination ourselves. Would you like to find out? The children eagerly answered, oh, yes. So, Elliott separated the blue-eyed children from the children with brown and green eyes. She had the blue-eyed children put on green construction paper armbands. And then she told the children that the brown-eyed students were smarter. Elliott came up with an explanation: intelligence. she told to the children, she lied to the children, was determined by melanin. She wrote the word on the board. The more melanin, the darker the person's eyes, and the smarter the person. Complete and total lie. A child noted that Elliot was a bluey, and yet she was a teacher. A boy piped up to explain that if she had brown eyes, she would be the principal or the superintendent. Elliot sent the brown-eyed children to lunch first and gave them a longer recess. The brown-eyed children could drink from the water fountain, but the blue-eyed children had to use paper cups. The change was instant, Elliot said. The children with brown eyes were suddenly more confident and condescending. They hurled nasty insults at the blue-eyed kids. The children with blue eyes made silly mistakes and became timid and despondent. The two groups stopped playing together. Fights broke out. I watched them exhibit all the behaviors the significant adults in their lives modeled for them, Elliot said. I didn't like what I saw. What Elliot said she learned from the exercise was that people are not born prejudiced, but they learn that behavior. And if it can be learned, she said, it can be unlearned. Okay, so that's that. This is an experiment that she recreated, and she does recreate often, I guess, of her initial experiment in 1968. And she was widely criticized for that because she was using children who couldn't make value judgments on their own. They were just following her, and whatever she told them as lies, they took as fact. So now when she teaches this blue-eye, brown-eye discrimination experiment, she uses adults. And this is her website right now today, oneraisejaneelliott.com, 2 L's, 2 T's, where she talks about it, the blue and brown eye exercise, featured videos, acclaim for the exercise. And those are some of her students. So here's my problem with all of that. That's just disarming, because this video was shown to a group of people yesterday as if it were new and fresh, and it was an anti-bias training exercise using blue and brown eyes to make the point. And this is what concerns me. Jane Elliott's brilliant idea is all based on this lie, that she could tell things to third graders that were not true about melanin making you smarter. Oh, and the prejudices come out. To me, it doesn't make any sense. And what do I know? Oprah loves her, of course. Other people love her. Other people think, well, sort of tacky to divide people based on eye color. Well, it's tacky based on skin color. But you're trying to teach people how to behave and how to interact, and you don't do that by empowering people to be terrible to each other for no reason other than you say that it's okay. And as I understand it, then the next day when the students came in, that Jane Elliott had them flip, that the power was in the blue-eyed kids and the brown-eyed kids were the slaves and the put-upons, and they didn't like it because they wanted to go back to the way they were. And it's all very simple-minded. There's a lot of intricacy in what goes on with this sort of inherent prejudice. And maybe I'm just dumb, but I don't understand the value of doing something like this that is temporary and is not going to stick with people. Whereas the color of skin you're in is something you can never escape. Whereas with Jane Elliott, one day with blue eyes you're in power, the next day you're out of power with blue eyes. I'm not sure what the point of that is, except to encourage retaliation. And so you think, well, how can we teach children to be empathetic without trying to make them feel terrible? And this is all what critical race theory is about, where there are people who don't want this critical race theory taught in schools because it puts the white kids on the defensive. It's taught from a black perspective that white kids are bad, and white parents don't want their kids to feel bad about themselves for something that they did not do. Well, this is sort of the critical race theory from the other side, which is just sort of as painful, with a white woman deciding who's the slave and who's the superior. And it's really very dangerous. And I remember when I was in grade school, so this happened in 68, this is grade school, so probably mid-70s, about 10 years after this happened. I remember one of our teachers tried to do this in our class. And I don't believe she did it with brown eyes and blue eyes. She did it randomly with the armbands. Some of us had a blue armband, some of us had a green armband, I believe, and we had to wear those. And she said, just like the Jane Elliott thing, well, the greens are in charge of the blues, and the blues have to do just the same thing. And I remember in the Midwest, our students said, no, we're not doing it. I'm not going against my friend because of the color of their armband. We think it's dumb. We think it's stupid that you're using an armband to set how we treat each other. And there are people, oh, well, that's the whole idea of teaching racism. But there has to be a certain amount of playing along or going with the scenario. And our teacher tried to punish us all, not based on our armband, but based on who was being anarchic or not. And the whole thing just kind of dissolved. And I think after about 15 minutes of trying, she just said, okay, take off your armbands. But I'm not sure what the point of that was, because she was not prepared for a rebellion of forcing us to turn against each other. So how do you teach empathy and race and all the other things that go into it, like poverty and parents and family and community? I don't think you do it by eye color. And I remembered of what John and Bobby Kennedy said when they were young. And I believe it was their father who took them on a tour of the Deep South when they were younger. And they just went around to places like Mississippi and other southern states where they were exposed to the real lives of these poor black people, immigrants. And they saw the status of their lives, and they spoke to them, and they got to know them. And it changed them. The experience changed what they believed and what they thought they knew, because they had been raised in very privileged lives. They had a lot of money, and they saw that these kids, same age as they were, didn't have anything. And it made them empathetic. Now you can argue, well, those are the Kennedy boys. They're smart. They care about other people. They're Democrats. Well, okay. But it's the experience that matters, and the experience has to be one that is created and encouraged and not enforced. And not one of separation and one of cruelty that doesn't encourage belonging. The arbitrariness of trying to teach a lesson by saying, blue eyes over there, brown eyes over there, have at it. It's not a very interesting scenario to me, and one I think that is very damaging. Because today, like it or not, you can pretty easily change your eye color if you're playing that game. Some people argue People try to change their skin color today, too. Try to fit in. You hear about stories about the brown paper bag test. Who can pass, who cannot pass. These are very delicate, intricate cultural totems that have meaning beyond just the separation of third graders into one side and to the other. At least that's my take on it. If you have thoughts on this, if you have comments, be sure to let me know. I'm always curious what you're thinking. And now, my friend, we're going to take one final blood pressure break. I'll see you back in a moment.